Hello, friends, and welcome to the City of the Immaculata. This is a channel where we discuss various topics of history and theology. If you're catching this video on YouTube, I would ask that you like the video, and if you haven't already, please consider subscribing. We continue our journey today, walking through the mysticism of Saint Bonaventure. Specifically, today, we are going to be considering God through being. So, some points to consider, just to backtrack of where we're coming from. In the previous two lectures, to quote Bonaventure here, thus by these two intermediate steps, two previous lectures, as it were, through which we enter into contemplation of God within us as in mirrors of created images, like the two middle wings of God within us as in mirrors of created things, like the two middle wings of the seraph spreads for flight. We can understand how we are guided to things divine through the rational soul itself and its naturally implanted faculties. We are also guided by the reformed faculties of the soul itself. So, Bonaventure, we had considered creation as it pertains to the mind as an image, specifically of powers of the soul of memory, intellect, and will, as well as those particular powers reformed through grace. We're now moving out of the mind in an upward trajectory. And this is made possible because our minds are immediately informed by truth itself. And because of this, Bonaventure says that we have passed through the sanctuary and we are now entering the Holy of Holies, and that we gaze upon the ark. And he takes this theme, this motif, and he is going to use it for the next two chapters. He likens what we're going to be discussing here as the two cherubim who stand over the ark, where he says that they're going to symbolize for us first the essential attributes of God. And Bonaventure says that we affix the soul's gaze upon God's name, which is He who is, as is the first name according to St. John Damascene. And for this we would look to the Old Testament, which for the scholastics, the primary derivative of this would be when God speaks to Moses and gives his name as I am who am. As well, we're going to be looking at the proper attributes of the three persons. Upon the good itself as the first name according to Dionysius the Areopagite. And here Bonaventure says we are looking primarily towards the New Testament, where we hear such language as in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, as well as none are good but the Father alone. And so with this first cherubim, considering being, and Bonaventure does his maybe, I would say, famous twist on the Anselmian ontological view of God. And he says that this being that we're considering is a being so certain that it cannot thought to not be. The most pure being comes to our mind in full flight from non-being. And therefore, Bonaventure says this must contain all of the attributes. If you look at this from the opposite end of that spectrum, in a similar way from full flight from being, we can also consider conceptually a complete nothingness. And of course, this nothingness being on the other end of that wide spectrum, this would have to contain none of the attributes of being. Now, since nothing is a mere privation of being, nothing can only be grasped by its relationship to being, whereas being relies on no precondition. So therefore, that which first enters the intellect must be pure act, therefore not a particular being. Bonaventure wants to say that being as the first object, he uses this analogy of just as we see through light, we see other things without seeing the light, so too through being, we see all other being without seeing it. So light that lightens the room allows us to see without necessarily seeing the light itself. Being, this proper being, this pure active being, allows us to see other beings. Now, our minds have become so accustomed to the phantasms that we see nothing when looking for the highest being. We've become so accustomed to the other beings, the particular beings. Yet this darkness, this being which allows us to see all other being, is the illumination of the mind, making one capable of seeing anything. This kind of gets back to the epistemic roots of Bonaventure's thought per divine illumination. And this first being, Bonaventure says, absolutely lacks in non-being. This is that sense of being in full flight from non-being. Therefore, Bonaventure begins to assess some of the attributes of it, such as it must be most simple, most actual, most perfect, most supremely one. It is unqualifiedly first because simple, and simple because eternal. Therefore, it is not mixed with any possibility, and since pure act, it is therefore supremely one. Then Bonaventure wants to consider the eternality of all of this, the first and the last, the origin and end of all things. He says that it is, of course, first and last, the Alpha, the Omega, making it both eternal and present, entirely present because eternal. Therefore, it is the center and the circumference of all things. It is greatest because most simple. The more power concentrated in one, the more infinite the thing is. It is wholly within and without all things. It is most changeless because it is most actual, unmoved, and gives all movement. It is most perfect because most immense, outside, above, and below all things. So in conclusion, Bonaventure ends the chapter by saying, to behold him perfectly is a most blessed thing. As it was said to Moses, therefore I will show you all good things. So you can see when we move to the consideration of God through being, we are stepping maybe into a little bit more of a dense scholastic language. And I don't want you guys to get lost in the complexity of this because when I think it's going to be in the next chapter, and I don't even know if I remember if I bring attention to it, but in the chapter, either in this one, but I think it's in the next one, Bonaventure says that when coming to consider these things, don't think that we are making the incomprehensibility of God comprehensible, because it's not what we're doing, but we're using a language that allows us to be able to speak about God. So the very first cherubim, the very first thing that we want to say about God is that it is the being which surpasses all being. It makes all other being actually possible for being the most simple, the most actual. So I hope you guys are enjoying these. If you do, again, please like and subscribe to the channel. Next time we will be considering the persons of God, reflecting on the other side of the cherubim, so stay tuned for that. Until then, God bless you all.